This is a dramatized story inspired by real debt situations. For educational and entertainment purposes only. Not legal or financial advice.
Section 1. Hook. Urozos oro 030. $91,000 in debt at 43. The restaurant was closed, the bank account was empty, and my name was still on every single loan. Marcus thought he was building something, a legacy, a place his kids could point to and say, "Our dad built that." Instead, at 43 years old, he was sitting in a parking lot at 11 p.m., too ashamed to go inside his own house and face his wife. What happened over the next 6 months? The calls, the court dates, the one conversation that changed everything. That's what this story is about. Section 2. Reality. 03040. Marcus Delgado opened Kamal & Co. in 2019, a Mexican-American fusion restaurant in a mid-sized Texas city. He'd saved for 7 years. He had a loyal following from the food truck he'd run for 4 years before that. He knew the food. He knew the customers. What he didn't know was what a global pandemic would do to every assumption he'd built his business on. By 2020, the dining room was closed. By 2021, he'd burned through his emergency fund trying to keep the staff paid. By 2022, he was running on takeout orders, a skeleton crew, and credit. Let's talk about the actual numbers, because that's where the real story lives. The small business loan he took out to launch Kamal & Co., $48,000. He'd paid down about $11,000 of it before the shutdowns hit. Remaining balance when he finally closed the doors, $37,000. That loan was personally guaranteed, meaning when the business couldn't pay, Marcus was on the hook. Credit cards, 4 of them, used to cover payroll gaps, equipment repairs, food supply shortages during inflation spikes. Total across all 4 cards, $31,400. The minimum payments alone were running him $940 a month. His personal car loan, a 2020 pickup he needed to do supply runs, $14,200 remaining, and then the one nobody talks about. The IRS debt. When you're a small business owner and you're drowning, sometimes payroll taxes are the last thing you pay. Marcus owed the IRS $8,600 in unpaid employer taxes. That number had been sitting there collecting penalties for 14 months. Total, $91,200 in debt. With 0 business income, a personal savings account at $340, and a mortgage payment due in 18 days. His wife, Sandra, was working as a dental hygienist, bringing in about $52,000 a year. They had 2 kids, 11 and 8. That $52,000 was now carrying everything: the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, the kids' school expenses, and it was not enough. Marcus was still trying to work. He'd picked up shifts at a commercial kitchen doing catering prep. $18 an hour, 3 days a week. It wasn't close to what he needed. But he kept telling Sandra it was temporary. That he had a plan. He didn't have a plan. Section 3. Emotional crisis. 4-730. The collection calls started in March, not just one agency, 3 different collection agencies for 3 different accounts. His phone became something he dreaded. He'd see an unknown number and feel a physical tightness in his chest. One afternoon, he was picking up his daughter from soccer practice. His phone rang, unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Same number. He stepped away from the other parents and answered. "Is this Marcus Delgado?" "Yes." "Mr. Delgado, this is a call from National Recovery Associates regarding your outstanding balance of $14,800 with..." He hung up. His daughter was waving at him from across the field. He waved back and smiled. Inside, he felt like the ground was opening underneath him. The calls came at 8 a.m. They came at 5 p.m. One Saturday morning, one came at 7:52 a.m. while the kids were eating breakfast. He'd started leaving his phone face down on the counter. Sandra noticed. "Who keeps calling?" "Vendors. Old stuff from the restaurant. I'm handling it." He wasn't handling it. The letter that finally cracked the surface came on a Tuesday. It was from the SBA, the Small Business Administration, formally notifying him that his loan was in default and that they were beginning the process of pursuing the personally guaranteed balance. That letter used the word foreclosure in the context of personal assets. Marcus read it standing at the kitchen counter. He read it 3 times. Then he folded it, put it in the back of the junk drawer under some old takeout menus, and didn't tell Sandra. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay next to his wife at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., staring at the ceiling. He'd built a spreadsheet on his phone, one of those obsessive late-night spreadsheets where you move numbers around hoping the math will somehow change. It never changed. Income minus expenses minus minimum debt payments equaled negative $2,200 every single month. There was no version of the spreadsheet where things got better without something major changing. He thought about his dad. His dad had worked a factory job for 31 years without ever owning anything with his name on it. Marcus had always told himself he was going to be different, that he was going to build something, and now at 43, the thing he'd built had buried him. The shame was the worst part, not the debt. The shame. The way he couldn't look his wife in the eye at dinner. The way he'd changed the subject when friends asked how the restaurant situation was going. The way he'd started dreading parent-teacher conferences because he wasn't sure if he could make the voluntary school fund contribution this year. He was a man who'd always figured things out, and for the first time in his life, he genuinely didn't know how to figure this out. Section 4. Wrong choices. 7, 30, 10, sown. Before Marcus found his way to the right answer, he made almost every wrong turn available to him. First wrong turn, the payday loan. In February, when the first credit card missed a payment and the late fee hit, Marcus went to a payday lender for $1,500 to cover the gap. The fee was $225 for 2 weeks. He rolled it over twice. That $1,500 ended up costing him $675 in fees before he paid it off. Money he didn't have spent on a solution that solved nothing. Second wrong turn, the balance transfer. He got a promotional offer in the mail. 0% APR for 15 months on balance transfers. He moved $8,000 from his highest interest card onto a new card. What he didn't fully account for was the 3% transfer fee, $240, the fact that he still couldn't make more than minimum payments, and that when the promotional period ended, the rate would jump to 26. 99%. He was not solving the debt. He was rescheduling it. Third wrong turn, and this one hurt the most. He pulled $9,000 from his 401k. He told himself it was a loan, not a withdrawal. But between the 10% early withdrawal penalty and federal income taxes, he actually netted about $6,300 after the government took its share. He used it to pay 2 months of mortgage and make minimum payments on the cards. It lasted 9 weeks. And now that retirement account, which he'd spent 12 years building, had a $9,000 hole in it that would cost him tens of thousands in lost compounding over the next 2 decades. Fourth wrong turn. The debt settlement company he found through a late-night online ad. They promised to settle his debt for pennies on the dollar. They charged a monthly fee to hold money in a special account while they negotiated with creditors. What they didn't clearly explain was that during this process, his accounts would go further delinquent, his credit score would crater, creditors could still sue him, and there was no guarantee any of it would work. After 2 months and $400 in fees, he got a lawsuit notice from one of the credit card companies anyway. He was now in a worse position than when he started making fixes. His credit score, which had been 680 18 months earlier, had dropped to 521. His FICO score was in freefall. The collection agencies had been joined by a collections lawsuit. The IRS had sent a second notice, and Sandra had found the SBA letter in the junk drawer. Section 5. Turning Point. 10 and 12 screenings. The night Sandra found the letter was the worst night of the marriage. Not loud, quiet. The kind of quiet that's worse than yelling. She sat at the kitchen table and read it, and then she looked at Marcus and said, "How long have you known about this?" He told her everything. 4 hours. He showed her the spreadsheet. He showed her all 4 credit card balances. He told her about the 401k. He told her about the payday loan. He told her about the debt settlement company. He put every folded up letter on the table. Sandra didn't leave. She didn't yell. She cried for a while, and then she said something Marcus didn't expect. "Okay, then we figure it out the right way, together, but no more hiding things." 3 days later, they were sitting in the office of a bankruptcy attorney, not because someone told them bankruptcy was the answer, but because they finally decided to find out what the actual options were instead of guessing. The attorney, a woman named Patricia Reeves, who'd been practicing bankruptcy law for 19 years, sat across from them and did something nobody else had done. She listened to the whole story. Then she laid out what was actually on the table. She explained that with Marcus's debt profile, a mix of business debt, personal credit cards, IRS debt, and a secured car loan with a household income that was over the median, he likely wouldn't qualify for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which would discharge most unsecured debts entirely. The means test, based on their combined household income, probably pushed them into Chapter 13 territory. But Chapter 13, she explained, wasn't a failure. It was a reorganization, a court-approved repayment plan, typically 3 to 5 years, where you pay back what you can afford based on your actual income, not what the credit card companies want. During that plan, all collection calls stop. Lawsuits stop. Wage garnishments stop. The automatic stay provision of bankruptcy law puts a legal wall between Marcus and every creditor, immediately. The IRS debt. That was important. Chapter 13 could include the IRS in the repayment plan, allowing them to pay it off over time without the escalating penalties and enforcement actions. She also mentioned that before jumping to bankruptcy, they should consider whether credit counseling through a nonprofit agency might help. A formal debt management plan could consolidate the credit card payments into one lower monthly payment with reduced interest rates. But given the lawsuit already filed and the IRS involvement and the size of the overall debt relative to their income, she thought Chapter 13 was likely the more appropriate path. She said the words that cut through everything. "You haven't done anything wrong by being here. You built a business during one of the hardest periods in modern American economic history. Bankruptcy law exists precisely for situations like yours." Marcus looked at Sandra. Sandra reached over and took his hand. Section 6, Educational Information, 12/1330. Here's what Marcus learned in that office that I want you to understand, because these distinctions matter. Chapter 7. Bankruptcy is a liquidation bankruptcy. Most unsecured debts, credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, can be discharged, meaning legally eliminated. But you have to pass a means test based on your state's median income. And certain assets can be at risk depending on your state's exemption laws. It typically takes 3 to 6 months and stays on your credit report for 10 years. Chapter 13. Bankruptcy is a reorganization. You keep your assets, but you follow a court-approved repayment plan for 3 to 5 years based on your disposable income. It stays on your credit report for 7 years. It's often better for people with regular income who want to protect a home from foreclosure, which was very relevant for Marcus. Debt consolidation can work for people with good enough credit to qualify for a lower interest personal loan that pays off higher interest debts. But it requires credit access that many people in serious debt no longer have. Debt settlement, what Marcus tried first, carries serious risks. Your credit score takes a major hit, creditors can still sue you, forgiven debt can sometimes be taxed as income, and not all companies offering this service are legitimate. Credit counseling through a nonprofit NFCC member agency is often a good first step before anything else. A certified counselor can review your full financial picture and tell you which path makes the most sense: debt management plan, consolidation, or referral to a bankruptcy attorney. On the credit score front, Yes, bankruptcy impacts your FICO score significantly, but if your score is already in the 500s from missed payments and collections, as Marcus's was, the relative damage is smaller than people assume, and rebuilding after bankruptcy is possible. It takes time, consistency, and the right tools. Marcus's attorney told him she'd seen clients with scores in the low 600s within 2 years of a Chapter 13 discharge. Always, and I want to be clear about this, always consult a licensed bankruptcy attorney or certified financial counselor before making any decisions about your debt situation. Every case is different. What worked for Marcus may not be the right path for you. Section 7, Resolution 1330-1445. Marcus and Sandra filed Chapter 13 in June. The automatic stay went into effect immediately. The collection calls stopped. The lawsuit was paused. The IRS notices stopped arriving. Their court-approved repayment plan came out to $1,340 a month, paid to a Chapter 13 trustee who distributed it to creditors according to priority. That was $400 less per month than Marcus had been paying in minimum payments alone without making any real progress. It wasn't over. There were still 4 years of the plan ahead of them. Sandra had picked up a couple extra shifts a month. Marcus had started doing private catering work, small events, private dinners, under a new, simplified structure. Slow money, honest money, the kind that didn't require a $48,000 loan to exist. The restaurant was gone. He'd grieved it. Some nights he still grieved it. But one Friday evening in October, he was in his backyard with his daughter. She was showing him a school project, a poster about people who work in their communities. She'd drawn a picture of a chef. She'd written under it, "My dad. He makes food that makes people happy." Marcus held that poster and stood very still for a moment. The debt wasn't gone. The credit score wasn't fixed. The 5-year plan was just beginning. But for the first time in 14 months, he didn't feel like he was disappearing. He felt like someone who had a path. If you are sitting somewhere right now watching this because you searched for something related to what Marcus went through. Business debt, bankruptcy, collection calls, IRS debt, maxed out credit cards. I want you to hear this directly. The most expensive thing you can do is wait. The longer unpaid debt sits, the more penalties accumulate, the more options close. Make the call. Talk to a nonprofit credit counseling agency. Schedule the bankruptcy consultation. Get the actual information before you make any decisions. You are not the first person to be in this position. You will not be the last, and there are legal, legitimate paths forward. Section 8, CTA 1445-15 Get the free debt checklist in the description. Link below.